NPC, and today I have kind of a impulsive, spontaneous video I've been thinking about doing for quite a bit of time, and it is a tier list about collectibles. Various different types of collectibles. I try to think of as many categories as I can that would be interesting to talk about. I'm almost certain there is stuff I have missed and will not be talked about in this video, so let us know in the comments what you think should have been on this tier list, and also where you think they could have been on the tier list. One thing to note that this is my opinion, and there's a few things I'm going to base this off of. One is how easy it is to collect in this category, how much financial opportunity there is in this category, and things like how fun and whatnot to collect. It's, again, this is my personal opinion. You'll kind of see more of how I grade things as things go along. I don't want to bore you to death with the details. But one thing I will say is that I am a fan of a YouTuber called Reserve Investments, who is a consultant for the collectibles and antique kind of world universe, and he's written a couple blogs and stuff about it. So he's a little bit controversial. Unfortunately, a lot of people don't like him because, sometimes when you tell the truth, people can't handle fact and reality. So, you're going to hear a little bit of what he says here and there in this tier list. And I myself, I've been collecting for almost 20 years at this point in numerous categories. So I have a general understanding of the vast majority of what we're going to be talking about today. Again, I'm not going to really bore you with how I'm basing off how I'm placing things on the tier list, but one thing to note is the more organic things are, the better. And again, you're going to see what that means as I go on in this tier list. Okay, so the first one we're going to be talking about is trading cards. So here I have a foil Charizard, and this is also relating to Magic the Gathering, Yu-Gi-Oh, basically every trading card game you can think of, not including playing cards and more organic stuff like that. So we're talking the trading card kind of creature world, and unfortunately, guys, I'm gonna have to put this in the C tier category. There is just a lot, and I mean a plethora of problems with this category. I originally wanted to put this in F, but there is some, interesting and organic stuff to this kind of universe of trading cards. But one of the biggest problems is that it is just riddled with mass-produced scarcity. It is easy to collect trading cards, but, that's by artificial design, considering, these companies can produce 4 billion cards a year. And it doesn't help that this is one of the most gate-kept markets by resellers. I mean, there's motherfuckers reselling shit for way over the top for unnecessary prices. I mean, people talk about it all over TikTok, YouTube. It's blatant with how problematic and bad this market is. And even the people I know who collect in this market have told me, yeah, it's a fucking problem. Now, if you're someone who actually plays the game or goes to tournaments or plays with friends, I'll dab you up. Look, you're not the problem. It's the people who see this as an investment opportunity or try to resell or just hoard fucking dozens of cards. Bro, you're fucking what, in your 30s, and you're hoarding a children's card game, bro. You've already crashed out God knows how long ago, bro. The 90s are over, dude. Look, I'm a nostalgic guy too, but you're the reason trading cards are fucking shit right now. I'm not gonna lie, bro. You're the fucking problem. And it's just a really toxic market. It's easy to get into, and it's beginner friendly, but at the same time, it's just riddled with traps and scams. And even when you look at the rarest and the holy grails of the trading card community, take for example, you look at Magic the Gathering, you got a Black Lotus. You look at Pokemon, you have the foil Charizard. These cards, I hate to tell you, are not that fucking rare. When you compare it to actual true rare items, these items just look like a fucking joke, especially when they're seen at these grossly inflated and embarrassing prices. So there is organicness and there is a lot of cool, interesting stuff about cards, so it doesn't deserve to be an F tier, but it is painfully low bottom of the barrel for like real life stuff in my opinion, or very close to it. Next up, we're going to talk about NFTs. Guys, come on. This is an easy fucking F tier. I can't even believe I have to talk about this one. I should have not talked about it. I'm really sorry. I don't need to explain why this is awful. If you're one of these fucking, pardon my French, idiots that fucking spent hundreds of thousands of dollars on this, you deserve to get clowned. I'm sorry. You're just a goon. You are not the MC. Let's just put it that way. You are an NPC. You're the definition of an NPC. And you might as well look like your stupid ass fucking NFT. You probably do, for all I fucking know, because that's your whole life is based off one little fucking JPEG that gets right click saved. So yeah, I'm tired of talking about this one. No one wants to talk about it. Let's move on. Funko Pops. Look, I am very, 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 very tempted to put this in F tier. I'm like almost. The problem with Funko Pops is I was gonna originally put them next to toys, but they are such a tumor and like a cancer. Like they're like Labubu's, they're like Beanie Babies. We're just gonna call this like the, bubble toy. Now Funko Pops have lasted a little longer than Beanie Babies and honestly Labubu's, but this is another one I don't really need to explain. They look terrible. Yes, they're easy to collect, and it's beginner friendly, but that's all it has for it. Have you ever looked at a Funko Pop collection and been like, wow, that looks cool that you have a wall of literal fucking filth? I'm sorry, it's just disgusting. There's nothing interesting about Funko Pops. It's like Fortnite. Like, do you like the fact that every IP is in Fortnite? Are you happy with that? Because I'm not. I think it's really sad. And Funko Pops are the same fucking thing. It's like, wow, it's just depressing. It's like peak level consumerism. So, I want to give the benefit of the doubt and put it into C because it's at least real life. But it's just so gross and fucking annoying. And look, I have some from like Christmas gifts and stuff. We all have them. It's like the parasite of collecting. So because of that and its reputation, and then we have Beanie Babies and fucking Labubus and all that fucking crap, I think I'll do the internet a favor and throw it in the F tier. I'm sorry, there's just no redeeming qualities here. Let's be a little less harsh and talk about, let's see here. I'm trying to do this in one recording, so you're going to hear a lot of interrupts and whatnot. Apparel collecting. So, vintage shirts, vintage jeans, kind of just, and not even vintage, just like apparel in general, You could talk about your Supreme clothes, you could talk about your purses, you could talk about all that shit. Not shoes. We're not including that one. That has its own kind of category, which we'll talk about later, which let me add that real quick. Okay, sorry about that. I had to add the sneakers. Okay. Technically, I think shoes, sneakers, kind of that world is in its own category away from apparel. Now, apparel is, in my opinion, probably the most popular thing to collect out of all these, at least in like rural city areas, because you got to think of like the popular girl in high school. Yeah, she's not going to probably have a fucking Stretch Armstrong. She's certainly not going to have any Godzilla toys. She's probably not going to have an SNES, but she's more likely to have, your Labubu or a fucking, I don't know, a nice collection of clothes or makeup or some shit like that. So it's another category that has a very low barrier to entry. And it's the type of thing that unfortunately is the reason why Goodwills and stuff are so like ran through already, because you have resellers quite literally trying to hunt for your Harley Davidson t-shirts and flip them for $200, right? So But when you look at these actual items, you know, in the long term and like what they are, there's, even though there's a lot of vintage and like, you know, organic collectability in apparel, there's just as much, you know, mass produced scarcity, just kind of garbage junk at the same time. And the problem with fashion, it's the problem with this category. So I'm gonna put this in seats here as I keep talking. The problem with collecting clothes is that it's very trend based, right? So, you know, 10 years ago when I was a teenager in high school, Supreme was everywhere. You know, it was about who had the most expensive fit. Even if you looked like a complete fucking jackass. I mean, you look at those videos now, God, they're so fucking cringe. But anyways, you know, you look at that, that was fashionable. Is do you have $20,000 shoes that look like fucking kid shoes, and you know, do you look like a fucking clown? Who's the biggest looking clown? And now it's like, oh, who looks the most poor but actually is flexing the most? Like, you know what I mean? So the problem is you're reliant on what the cool kids think is cool and relevant. So because of that, it's just so unreliable in terms of like investment opportunities and stuff. There's no real stability, but I will say, if you do dabble with this market and know what you're looking for, your drip will go through the roof. So you do, you know, you're more likely to get a cute girl's number with vintage apparel than probably anything else on this fucking list you're gonna see, because, you know, yeah, you might not have like some super rare investment of an item, and you know, it might go out of style, but you know, you could still up your, by doing it, you're upping up your riz. So that's the most important thing. But if you want to get rid of the riz aspect and talk about like raw collectible potential, there's just a lot holding it back, culture wise and production wise. I mean, you know, you can find a one-of-a-kind t-shirt at a fucking swap meet where you have to overpay $6 just to fucking walk in. Fairfax swap meet. Fucking scam artists. Anyways, let's move on to the next one. Speaking of fashion, let's talk about the sneaker world. You know, your Jordans, your Adidas, you know, all that kind of crap. I am very tempted to put this in C tier, maybe B tier, but I'm going to put this in C tier. Again, one thing I should note is that there's no order for where they are in the tier list, just for the record. They could be anywhere. Now, sneakers, what are nice about sneakers compared to like clothes is that things are a little easier to follow. It's a little more formulaic with how you can approach sneakers, you know. You have things like StockX and stuff, which, you know, they have it for clothes, but I think when it comes to sneakers, it's easier to follow and understand, and there is a lot of cool, interesting stuff when it comes to sneakers. At the same time, though, it is very trend reliant on fashion. And when you're fundamentally reliant on fashion, when it comes to an investment opportunity, you're just held back a lot. So, and you know, like right now, sneakers are like kind of going down the toilet, and it's also one of those markets that has just been ravaged by resellers who try to capitalize on the market. And you know, you know who knows it the best are the sneaker people. It's just like you guys see what's been fucking happening, and it's like you also got to take into consideration with everything I've kind of shown in this kind of section so far is that a company can reproduce this stuff, and that's a big problem that holds back sneakers. You can have these very rare, unique style sneakers that are worth a lot of money, and then Nike's like, fuck you, we're gonna bend over every reseller and re-release the shoes. And it's like, what's the difference? Also, you got to think with a lot of the stuff I'm talking about here, fakes. All of these things we've been talking about so far are very easy to fake. Shoes are notorious for having fakes in them. So because of all those things holding it back, it's definitely not F tier. There's a lot of cool, interesting stuff, but It is just held back by too fucking much. I'm sorry. Next, we're gonna talk about vinyl records. Vinyl is, in my opinion, an easy A tier. Now, vinyl does have the issue of kind of like a lot of mass production stuff, but there is just so much more organic, interesting things going on for vinyl, and a lot of the mass production for vinyl isn't like atrocious. It's not insulting, like say with Pokemon cards or Jordans or fucking Funko Pops. There's a lot more going on here, and vinyl records are getting very close to becoming an established market. Basically, anything kind of over 100 years old ends up in this kind of like established market zone, where it's like we have a history of understanding this item. With items that are under 100 years, it's a lot more speculative. So, you know, a historical artifact that's 500 years old is much more financially understood than Jordans, right? Because you know, Jordans, you know, they might not survive they might not be relevant in the next 10, 20, 15 years, like Beanie Babies. So vinyl records are getting close to that. They've been a standard for music for all of the 20th century, pretty much. They did go out of style, but then they're making a huge comeback with newer generations. And even if you take newer generations out of the equation, there's just a lot of cool stuff about vinyl, and there's a lot of organic collectability, and it's one of those markets that heavily rewards you for being knowledgeable on it. Whereas the other markets, you can be punished for being too knowledgeable on it, like the lower tier entries. So I really like vinyl. It's not S tier, you know, it still falls under a couple like things. But overall, I think this is a great one to collect. You can collect a lot of them and get really cool stuff. Yeah, you have Amoeba Music kind of gatekeeping a lot of crap, and you know, every indie kind of punk shop in LA and New York, I'm sure, is got some $400 album when you could probably get it for like $150 on eBay. But I mean, that's really that's like way more obscure compared to other mass-produced crap, and it's just a cool one to collect. And you know, vinyl's got swag to it. Let's just be real here. You know, especially if you have a good taste in music, you can flex that. You know, you can flex your personality way more with vinyl than you can with a lot of other things. So I think vinyl is a really good one. I don't collect vinyl myself. My dad does, but I think this is a very good one to collect. Another great one to collect, that is a horrible picture, but that is VHS. I love VHS. I am a VHS addict, so I'll admit there's a little bit of a bias here, but hear me out on this one. VHS is one of those ones where it's really easy to collect, and there's a lot of, if you're knowledgeable, you will be heavily rewarded in this category. The one downside with VHS, despite it being extremely organic, it's one of the most organic things to collect, in my opinion. The kind of resell limited edition world did not really sink their hands into this one very well as of making this video. Now, you do have the graded community. You do have those grade A dick suckers that try to sell a copy of Halloween for $500,000 and make me want to blow my brains out. But apart from those biblical morons, I think VHS is a very great one to collect. You know, you have variations, you have very rare tapes, you just and none of it's like, oh, we've only made 5 on purpose. It's like, oh, they just couldn't make that many. So I like that a lot, but it is very difficult to resell. If you're trying to resell in this category, you have to be like the tippity dippity top to resell in this category. It's not, it's kind of like easy to get into, but very hard to master. But with how interesting and diverse VHS can be, it's growing in popularity, and we're already starting to see some really interesting, unique items sell for the big bucks now. So yeah, I think VHS and vinyl have great potential. And I've talked about VHS a lot on this channel, and I just think it's just a really good one to collect. Very fun one to collect too. You can go to swap meet, find a box of VHS tapes, boom, you got a great collection right there. You don't need to buy another one. So great one. Speaking of VHS, let's talk about DVD. Now, DVD, in my opinion, is kind of the nerfed version of VHS. DVD is even easier to collect, especially nowadays. However, the problem with DVD is that when you get to the rare stuff, when you get to the good stuff, there's a lot less interesting stuff, in my opinion, to collect. And this is coming from someone who has some of the rarest DVDs out there. Not to flex a little bit, but I'll show a little screenshot of some of my rarest DVDs just so you know what I'm talking about. I know what I'm talking about. I am newer to DVDs, but from what I've been seeing and kind of understanding historical context, it is a little more held. It's kind of like, it's easier to get into than VHS because tapes are just harder to find these days. But the end game isn't as strong as VHS. VHS has a much more established and stronger kind of end game when it comes to the really rare and interesting items. So because of that, DVD is kind of like a nerfed version, but still a great thing to collect. It is one of the most notoriously hoarded categories. It's very common to see a person with a toy Blu-ray collection or a toy or a DVD Funko collection. They kind of, stuff like that can kind of go hand in hand with hoarding, unfortunately. It's definitely probably one of the most hoarded out of everything here, but it's a very cool one. I respect DVD collecting a lot. However, it is definitely more nerfed just because of how more artificial the market for DVDs can be. And the really interesting and unique stuff hasn't really been discovered yet. I think DVDs, in terms of a collecting kind of market, are getting understood just now, and definitely need time to flourish, like vinyl and VHS, which have kind of shown that they have great potential. So that's my take on DVD. Now I'm drinking water. Okay. Let's talk about books. Let's talk about vintage books. Where is this? Is this A or S? Honestly, I am not as knowledgeable on books. However, if we're talking just not comic books, just books, this might be an S tier. And the reason is because, one, books are easy to get into, but they're one of the hardest to master, because there is thousands of years worth of books. However, books can go all the way up to rival some of the most expensive paintings. So, books has a great entry, and its end game is just fucking limitless. However, it is also a very difficult category at the same time to try to kind of get into and get good at. Extremely intimidating. However, I think if you are able to pull off books and understand them, they have some of the, I think, they quite statistically have the best reselling potential. The rarity can just go through the roof. Their organic collectability goes through the roof. And it's interesting. They do it in books, for some reason, are able to get away with being a little more artificial than everything else, and be kind of whatchamacallit, understandable to follow. Like, for example, it's like in the book world, it's not like VHS. It's like, oh, this B horror movie is the really expensive one you gotta get Attack of the Killer Refrigerator. But with books, it's like, oh, you need the 1984 version of this book because it has this rare typo where the guy said something super fucking unhinged, and then they had to pull that copy. So, it's one of those ones where you're probably going to be collecting a lot of variants, but the end game is like Shakespeare fucking First Prince or some shit like that. So there's just limitless potential when it comes to books. It's easy to get into, extremely difficult to master. I mean, keep in mind, when we're talking tier lists here, we're talking like you're mastering this kind of category. So, difficulty is considered, but, at the same time, it's like if you can pull off vintage books, you're going to do very fucking well. And to prove my point, one of the best-selling eBay accounts, like, in history is a book-selling account. Like, number one. So, they're not selling a bunch of rare stuff all the time, but they're just flipping books. And they're the number one on eBay. So, it proves my point that books are like, if you give them time, you can pretty much excel at everything when it comes to books. So, even though I don't collect a lot, I have a little bit. I think it's just an easy S tier. It's just got too much going for it. That's good. Comic books, however, are a funny one. So, comic books used to, I think, be really good. Unfortunately, the auction kind of mass-produced universe rubbed its balls all over comic books, and it is taken a huge fucking shit. Comic books, and I hate to say it, are in C tier. It is another that has been suckered by mass-produced hype and has been violated in way too many ways to fucking count. It's really sad. It's really sad to see the state of comic books in this day and age. Even for the very greats like Action Comics 1, the fundamental problem with comic books is that there is really rare stuff, of course, but people's rarity is unfortunately based off a artificial grade over actual organic rarity. It's like, for example, a low, a Hulk 181 might be $20,000 if it's in a 6.0, but if it's a 9.0, it's $100,000 or some dumb shit like that. So basically, someone looking at it and saying, "Oh, it's a 9," that's how people base their rarity. And fun fact for those of you who don't collect comic books, there's a thing called optimal grade, meaning finding a comic book at a specific grade so you can get the most bang out of your buck. The problem is that is a thing that exists. The problem is that, like, the fact that you can do that with a comic book is a problem. That is, in my opinion, a massive red flag that we're basing things more off of a number than the actual comic itself. And again, there's still comics that are worth millions of dollars, but the reason they're expensive is based off of a grade over the actual comic book itself. And the fact that an ungraded comic book is significantly cheaper and seen as a financial risk just shows you how fucking flawed comic books are. I'm sorry. When I see those walls of like graded comic books, you just look fucking stupid, dude. I'm sorry. I hate to tell you, like, it doesn't look cool. It doesn't. It looks fucking stupid. Please take them out of the case and display them properly, because you're insulting my fucking eyeballs. Let's now talk about cassettes and kind of 8-track, all that. It's kind of just like the DVD equivalent to vinyl. It's like where DVD is the nerfed version of VHS. cassette, 8-track, all that mumbo jumbo. My opinion, CDs, nerfed version of vinyl. It's just that the problem is these kind of newer alternate music formats, in terms of a collecting standpoint, are kind of overshadowed by vinyl. However, they all kind of shine with their organicness in different ways than vinyl. And I'd say the same with DVD. But, yeah, it's just, in my opinion, it's just kind of the nerfed equivalent to vinyl. It's just vinyl as a collectible when it comes to music. It just dominates music compared to the other ones. But there still is a lot of cool, interesting, unique stuff when it comes to cassettes, 8-track CDs, kind of all that mumbo jumbo. I have very little knowledge on this market. I know game OSTs on CD do very well, but yeah, in my eyes, it's just the nerfed version of vinyl. Now, let's talk about video game skins. Now, I've actually collected in this market for almost 10 years now, before most people even knew there were digital skins. And not only being in this market off and on for 10 years, and actually benefiting off of the recent CSGO crash that has happened 2 weeks ago as I'm making this video, this is an easy F tier. I'm sorry, if you're one of these guys who has millions of dollars of digital game skins as an investment opportunity, you're kind of a dumbass. I'm so sorry. Look, I'm a part of this market too. I've literally financially benefited from this market before, not by a lot, but I have capitalized on this dip. I have you probably see some CS:GO footage. This that knife I have on screen is I bought it during the dip. I've made about $300 ever since it's gone up. So as someone who has literally financially benefited from this market and being in it for a long time, it is a horrible investment. It is a terrible investment. These guys who are putting in millions of dollars worth of CS:GO skins, you're a dummy. I'm sorry. If you're seeing this, if you like collecting skins and like having a cool item to flex on people, that's chill. Look, that's totally chill. If you want to have a $5,000 knife, go for it. I think it's cool. Like, I'd love to have a fucking butterfly gamma Doppler emerald, stat track factory new. Who the fuck wouldn't? But when you compare them to actual collectibles, and also when you look at real knives, when you look at like actual knives in real life, just video game skins in general are not investment opportunities. They are just not by design. Because you gotta think, someone at Valve, someone you don't know, is gatekeeping a server, and if anything happens to that server, guess what? Just like that, all your shit's gone. Your $100,000 iBuyPower Hollow 2014 sticker, gone. Your souvenir factory new Dragonlord, gone. Your 20 knives, which you've never even fucking touched, despite all of them being stat track, gone. So you are fundamentally reliant on a server, just like NFTs. It's better than NFTs, but really not by much. It's really not by much. And like, when I think about a lot of video games, the only one that has like profitable opportunity is quite literally CS:GO. TF2's market is gatekept by resellers and collectors. Most games don't even let you fucking sell your skins. It's like, in every other market just sucks a bag of dicks. So you are quite literally like, one of the only profitable skin markets is CS:GO, and over the past year it has proven to be volatile over, gatekept by Chinese and Saudi Arabian collectors. It's just, and the prices get overinflated. Let's just be fucking honest here. It is a bad market for investing. It is a bad market for investing. If you have millions of dollars worth of CS:GO skins, take it all out, throw it in the S&P 500. Game Video game skins are not a legitimate investment. Literally, you're better off fucking putting it all into Pokemon cards or comic books or fucking Funko Pops. I hate to break it to you. The only thing that video game skins are better than are NFTs. I'm not fucking joking. And again, this is coming from someone who has financially benefited from this market. So I am telling you, as someone who has probably been doing this longer than you have, this is a bad market. A terrible market. Do not be one of these guys who has millions of dollars worth of CS:GO skins. If you want to have a knife or two that's expensive as fuck, that's chill. But these are not investments. I'm sorry, these are not investments. Moving on, let's talk about historical artifacts. This is another easy S tier. I'm sorry. We're talking about butterfly sapphires in a video game, and then we talk about a 500-year-old medieval sword. Which one's cooler? Which one's cooler? If you said the sapphire, you're just a dumbass and you need to fucking log off and just leave a dislike on this video already, please. But historical artifacts, ancient coins, ancient statues, medieval swords, they're just fucking awesome. Anyone of any age is gonna see a 2,000-year-old gladiator helmet and be like, that's fucking badass. AI is gonna think that's badass. Everyone thinks that is badass, hands down. As a matter of fact, this is such a good fucking category that half the time you can't even fucking buy this shit because the government or museums would rather just gatekeep it for themselves, and I don't fucking blame them. So it's just one of those categories that it is just the definition of organic collecting. And I know Reserve Investments has said like, oh, this is a hard one to get into when it comes to an investment opportunity, which is true, but that's not going to stop you from like collecting coins or stuff like that. If you want to just collect stuff for the sake of it, you totally fucking can, and you can have a really cool collection. Like if you had a collection of like old pennies and stuff, that would be really cool. Speaking of financial currency, let's talk about currency collecting. This is probably one of the most OG classic collectible categories to collect. We're talking your old school $1 bills to your $100,000 bills, which I'm pretty sure are illegal to own, although there was a auction for one apparently, but I thought they were illegal. I don't know. Everything else though is fair game. There's a lot of great history. There's no such thing as mass-produced scarcity in this market at all. If you have a $500 bill, you got a $500 bill, unless you printed it on your fucking cheap-ass printer. But otherwise, I think this is a great one to collect. It's kind of snobby. Like if you came up to me and you're like, "Oh, I am a currency collector," I'm gonna think you have like a monocle, like glasses and like a mustache. And if you're one of those guys who flexes that, you probably deserve a wedgie or two. And if you told me you got your head dunked in the toilet in high school, I'd probably be like, they should have done it more often. But when you just look at currency collecting, I think it's a really cool and interesting one to dabble in. There's just a lot of cool stuff going on, a lot of interesting stuff. Fun fact, a $10,000 bill recently went for like $500,000. So there's a lot of cool stuff. You could also throw pennies and coins in this kind of category too. They're a mix between medieval and, historical items and currency. It just, But I don't think it has as much potential as like historical items or books. But there's a lot of potential in currency collecting, and it's very established. Very established. Again, I'm pretty sure it's one of the first to invent the grading category. And in this situation, it makes a lot more sense. It makes sense with comics, but it's just done at such an offensive level with comics, unlike Currency, where it just, they do it better because they fucking invented it. It's just fact. Okay, sorry, my friend was texting me. After recording this, I'm going to hang out with a buddy. So yeah. Anywho, let's just continue on here. Next, let's take a look at. You know what? I'm gonna have to cut this video again because I realized. Oh wait, no, I'm missing one. Hold on. Let me cut the video again. Fuck. Okay, so this next one we're going to be talking about here is sports memorabilia. Sports memorabilia can mean a plethora of things, whether it comes to trading cards or one-of-a-kind jerseys or stuff like that. It's kind of a, it's kind of hard to broadly generalize this category, but in my opinion, I think this is a B tier. For as much organic collectability, there's a lot of mass-produced scarcity. But worst of all, there is a lot of whatchamacallit. There's a lot of malicious practice in this kind of collecting world. A great example is they once got Babe Ruth's jersey. I think it was Babe Ruth's jersey. You can correct me on it. And they ripped it into pieces and then sold it into trading cards. What the fuck? That's fucked up. That is bad. The fact that, and it's one of the few like categories that did that, because props and like historical oddball items weren't seen as like that special back then, or like people just sold them in different ways. So unfortunately, a lot of items got destroyed by companies to maximize their profits, and that's really fucking sad. But at the same time, you have your Honest Wagners, you have your signed baseballs, you have your signed baseball bats, you have your pro jerseys used by actual guys. At the same time, you have a plethora of counterfeits. It kind of balances itself out, but I think if you're a sports fan, there's a lot of cool, interesting stuff you can collect. So, because of that, I think it's just kind of in the middle B tier. Now let's talk about vintage cars or car collecting. This is not A tier. I think this is one of those markets that is a little bit overinflated. It's the classic category that makes every celebrity go broke. That's a known fact. You just look at every story of someone who made it big in Hollywood and then lost everything. You'll probably hear something about a very expensive car collection. It's one of those ones that's it's one of the two collectible categories that has like an almost impossible barrier to entry. You have to be rich. There's just no, you have to be rich. If you want to collect cars, you're fucking balling. There's nothing more to say. That being said, if you have the ability to ball like that, there's very cool items you can get in car collecting. Beautiful cars. That's a Chevy Cobra, if you were curious. It's one of my favorites. But at the same time, it's like it's so grossly priced. Not grossly priced, but it's just, you know, it's one of those where it's like, oh, here's a new Ferrari, and then you drive it, and then it just loses half its value, or it just kind of sits there. It's just kind of one of those, it's a little bit of a hard one for me to really talk about, in my opinion. I think it has a lot of great potential, but you have to cash out so hard for this one that it kind of holds it back. Like, you're not gonna get like the, oh my god, I found the lucky fucking 1933 Ferrari. It's like, no, everything is gatekept. Everything in car collecting is kind of like gatekept. There's no such thing as a deal on car collecting. You also got to think about maintenance and all that crazy mumbo jumbo. So, yeah, there's just a lot holding it back. And, if you're collecting in the vintage kind of world, I think you'll do really well. But if you're trying to collect like every new Lamborghini and shit, it's kind of cornball behavior. It's got such a snobby like reputation to it, but you can't really deny the potential of car collecting if you are to invest in it. So that's kind of where I sit with cars. It's not S tier, but it does have super end game potential. It's just probably one of the most difficult to enter. Speaking of difficult to enter, but being a lot more worth it, is fossils. We're talking full-on T-Rex skeletons. We're talking mammoth skulls. We're talking all that prehistoric mumbo jumbo. If you can collect in this category, you are collecting the ultimate form of history. You are collecting things that are older than everything you'll ever know combined. There's nothing cooler than owning a fucking Spinosaurus skull. I'm sorry. There's nothing owning a Spinosaurus skull or a T-Rex skull will always be badass. It's impossible for some company to mass produce T-Rex teeth because they were made 4 billion years ago. You just can't fake that. So it is completely corporate immune. There's limitless organic collectability. It might not command prices like cars or even some historical artifacts, but you cannot deny how badass it would be for someone to walk in your room and be like, oh, you have a fucking T-Rex tooth? Even if it was like, oh, you have some like little tooth from back in the day that was only $500, that's still fucking badass. Dinosaur fossils are fundamentally badass. You cannot argue with it. If you're gonna come up to me as a fucking Funko Pop collector or a trading card collector and tell me your little stupid ass collection is cooler than one T-Rex tooth, I'm gonna slap you in the fucking face. I'm sorry. There's almost nothing as cool as dinosaur fossil collecting. There is one drawback, in that there has been a challenge of it being morally unethical. However, that's a whole nother topic to debate. The ethnicality of collecting dinosaur fossils. There's arguments against scientists, or there's arguments against collectors. So it's kind of a coin flip. Believe it or not, it's kind of slimy on both sides, but kind of right on both. There's some really great videos on the ethnicality of fossil collecting. But if you can get your hands on this market, it's sexy. Everyone finds it hot. Now let's talk about this guy. Now, this is the representative for me of 20th century paintings. This is a Jackson Pollock. This is, in my opinion, an A tier. It's kind of, okay, before we get to that one, let's talk historical paintings. So this is pre-20th century, in my opinion. Now, there's when it comes to talking about paintings, there's a bunch of different categories. The surrealism, the modern, the this, the that, the blah. But for simplicity's sakes, I'm doing pre-20th century, 20th century, 21st century. Pre-20th century is S tier. I don't need to explain why the Mona Lisa is godlike. I don't need to explain why Vincent van Gogh's art is legendary. I shouldn't have to explain why these masterpieces are legendary. Anything Da Vinci has made, even if it came out of his fucking asshole, is a grail, right? Anything Da Vinci does, anything he's fucking painted is a grail. 20th century, on the other hand, is kind of, in my opinion, the nerfed version of pre-20th century. Just because things start to get a little more like weird and rando. Believe it or not, you can easily collect 20th century art. I actually have a few 20th century pieces that are one of a kind that I've collected over the years, and I absolutely love them. I love them, but they're not like, most of them are not going to be like investment opportunities. Anything in like pre 20th century might not be worth $100,000, but you can get some really cool stuff. But you might have to spend at least like $2,000 or some shit. Whereas with more modern paintings like post 20th century, there's a lot of garbage, unfortunately. So you kind of have to narrow down the good stuff from the bad stuff, and the good stuff is unfortunately auction gate kept. And it's also when people start to criticize art, you know, like for example, Penguin Zero, aka Charlie, aka whatever you want to call him, Moist Critical, does not like modern art. And you know, one of his examples was Jackson Pollock. He just thinks that art is fucking stupid. Whereas other people are like, oh, but if you zoom in, you see like all the details and stuff. And I understand both sides. That is not something that happens with 20th, pre-20th century. It starts to happen more with 20th century and 21st century. So yeah, I just think of 20th century art as the nerfed version of pre-20th century. Post-20th century, however, is kind of pee-pee caca. This is where art kind of started, in my opinion, to just get stupid. You know, you have Damien Hirst literally telling people to put dots on the fucking wall. Or, you know, the classic banana tape. It's really pushing the idea that there's blatant money laundering in collectibles. It's kind of where, you know, anyone who doesn't like art collecting are going to look at it and be like, oh yeah, all art is a money laundering scam. And look at the fucking banana tape. And when, you know, you point that out, it's like, it's not a bad point, because it's not a bad argument to diss on art like that, especially when you're seeing shit like that. You're seeing Damien Hirst putting fucking medical supplies in a table. It's like, what? So, yeah, now you have things like Banksy, and in my opinion, Banksy is one of my favorite artists of all fucking time, hands down. But at the same time, a lot of post 20th century, a lot of 21st century art is kind of chopped. I'm not gonna lie to you. A lot of it doesn't hold its value. A lot of it's kind of based off trends, and a lot of it's just not fundamentally interesting. And it kind of becomes one of the biggest arguments against fine art and calling it money laundering and a scam and all that shit. So, yeah, unfortunately, you know, I feel like art has kind of devolved over time. A lot of people, I think, would agree with me, but that's just how I see 20th century art, unless you're talking... That's how I see 21st century art, unless you're talking about a Banksy. Alright, video games. Video games used to be an A tier. It has descended and been nerfed to a B tier, if not almost a C tier. But I'm going to be nice, and you know what? I'm tempted to put this in C tier. I'm gonna be honest. I hate to break it to you guys. This one has really fallen off. Back in the 2000s, this was great. Video games were fucking awesome to collect. You can get a copy of, what the hell was that shit called? Stadium events for great prices. Nowadays, this market, ever since COVID, has been kind of violated. Now we have $1,000 PS2 games, which is like, what the fuck? And then all the items that once got inflated are just kind of taking dumps. You can now get record prices for Atari games. This one's kind of generational based, and it's unfortunately riddled with resellers and all that kind of crap. It used to be a really good one. I love game collecting. I have a decent sized game collection. It's not atrociously big, but it's a cool one. And there is organic collectability, but you have to have a lot of money, and you have to be very skilled. And unless you're willing to like climb to the top, you're just gonna get slapped around and spanked, just like all fucking day. It's just, you will get humiliated in this market if you're not careful. That's just kind of my opinion on games. Again, I've been collecting video games for almost 20 years, and watching it kind of deteriorate into this kind of abomination of a state is really heartbreaking. And I wish I could place higher, but I'd be fucking lying to myself when I see shit like WADA and sealed game collecting just selling stuff for offensive prices. Speaking of another OG, this is toys. This is a solid B tier. I love toys. I've been collecting toys before anything else since, the dawn of mankind. I've been collecting toys. But I used to think toys would have been an A tier if you're talking pre-2015. But now, fast forward, I don't know why Rocket Fett's going for $1.3 million. I don't understand that. That is so fucking stupid. Like, Rocket Fett should not be going more than goddamn movie props from Star Wars, but what the hell do I know? I'm not collectible illiterate like some people. But toys are unfortunately, kind of a sucker to artificial mass-produced scarcity like games, cards, shoes, and comics. But the one thing, and I'm including plushes in this kind of category too. The one thing about toy collecting, though, is that it has enough organic stuff going on to kind of keep it above a lot of the other stuff. It's got the most prototypes. It does very, like, when you look at the tippity top of toy collecting, it does better than almost anything below C. Like, and I'm really referring to prototypes and like unreleased stuff and like your grails, like your real grails, not your limited edition 100 statue of Goku jamming a fucking Dragon Ball up his ass. I'm talking like your Ultimanasauruses. I'm talking your Trikes. I'm talking your rocket firing Boba Fett's. I'm talking it's like stuff like that, or even a fucking Bonzi Buddy plush. Did you know those can pop for $1,000? Stuff like that carries toy collecting way more than the other categories. Like, video games have a lot of cool prototypes, but the market doesn't do it as well. Its organicness isn't as strong as toys. So that's the one thing I'm going to say about toys. Its end game is just better. It's easy to collect toys. It's got a low barrier to entry. Man, can your room look like a fucking mess, though, and slobby if you don't display your shit properly. One of the worst compliments you can get is if someone says your room looks like a toy store. Bro, if someone says your room looks like a toy store, bro, I'm sorry. You gotta sell everything. That's done. You're done. You gotta throw in the towel, big guy. You cannot have your place be called a toy store, bro. That's crash out material right there for me. But I don't know. I don't like my room looking like a fucking Target. Again, I have toys displayed, but you just got to be careful with this category. I can't tell you how many times I see a 30 plus 40 year collector and they have the exact same shit as the other guy who's been collecting for 40 years. You have to really know what you're doing with toys. And if you're a toy collector, I'm going to tell you this. If you're one of these guys who has 30 years worth of toys, I'm gonna tell you that you should liquidate and get yourself some really good pieces. You're gonna like that way more than having all the junk and those 20 fucking Spider-Mans you don't even look at. It's like you can't even see the one in the back, dude. You can't even look at all those Optimus Primes you have, bro. The fact that you have to like, oh, hold on, what's this one again? I don't know. That's like grade A cornball behavior, and this is coming from someone who's been collecting toys for over 20 years. Film reels. Believe it or not, people collect film reels. Has a low barrier to entry, but is hands down the most gate-kept, easily one of the most gate-kept categories in this genre. It's one of those ones where it's like it's a small group of people who have like 30,000 reels. So it is pretty much only endgame collectors right now collecting in this category. Most of them are historians, most of them are preservationists. So they're mostly for a good cause, some of them are bad guys. But like with tapes, vinyl, and everything, there is an argument of deterioration. But at the same time, you're usually not playing these all the time. So it's kind of just cool to be like, oh, here's the official reel of this or that. Plethora of, you know what, I'm going to put this in A. This does a little bit. There's just so much cool, interesting stuff. No company's mass producing re-releases on film reel. If you have a film reel, it's guaranteed legit. And even if it's a bootleg, it's like, okay, who cares if I have a bootleg film reel of Jurassic Park? It's Jurassic Park on a fucking film reel. That's fucking badass. I'm sorry. The potential for like investment opportunities, I wouldn't say are exactly there. I think the market actually still needs time, despite technically being as established, if not more than vinyl record, or if not on the same level. I don't know which one came first, but they're kind of the same age, and there's a lot of potential. But it's almost like there's no beginner entry. It's like you just either you're a pro or you're a hoe. Historical or vintage wine collecting. So like your Samuel Alsop's Arctic Ale. No, I don't really know where to put this one. I guess technically this would be more like a historical item. I'm going to put this in B. You're kind of reliant on, you know, how much liquid and stuff's in there, and it's not always legal, I think, to ship depending on what state and like country you're from. There's a lot of laws and regulations, and you know, this okay, I might have goofed up a little bit. This probably should have been in historical collectibles, but with the way it's kind of managed from what I've seen, it does act a little differently from traditional collectibles, but I don't think it's on the same level as the stuff up here, but it's definitely a formidable collectible category to collect in if you know what you're doing. It's not like a, hey, come in and just start collecting this shit. You don't do that with like vintage alcohols and stuff. Now we're near the end game here. First off, we have Animatronics. This is the most difficult collectible category to collect, hands down. Extremely difficult. You need engineering skills to understand this one. There's not really a barrier to entry. Yes, people, believe it or not, collect animatronics. Very few, because very few people not only don't have the money for it, but you also need the technical skill for it. So if you can pull that off, this is like a god tier one, because it is just, everything's organic, everything's cool. This is not, okay, I don't want to include, not to be rude, this is not including Halloween props. So you know, you're fucking like, there's people who collect like Halloween collectibles and animatronics, like that kind of cheapo shit. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking like commercial grade a Chuck E. Cheese animatronic. The maintenance is a fucking nightmare. The skills you need are very hard. You need to be dedicated. You need to be truly passionate. But if you can pull off everything, you can have one of the most insane fucking collections ever. If you have one animatronic, that is going to be the crown jewel holy grail of your collection. Pretty much. Like, even if you had a fucking T-Rex tooth, that T-Rex tooth will have to beef pretty hard with your full-on Chuck E. Cheese animatronic. You know what I'm saying? So, you know, you got your Disneys, you got your Showbiz, you got your, you know, so there's just so much cool stuff going on with animatronics. If in a perfect world you can pull it off, you have to be worthy and you have to be skilled enough to pull it off. It is hands down the most difficult because you need to be a true dedicated collector to collect animatronics. You can't be a lazy fucking slob. So I think if you can pull it off in a theoretical standpoint, I think animatronics are definitely S tier. Lastly, we have movie props. Another S tier. Guys, I love movie props. I love them. It is just, and I'm assuming originals here, limitless opportunities for cool shit. Either you have a B horror prop, which might not be as expensive, or you have fucking Luke Skywalker's lightsaber. Either way, these are museum quality items. These things are fucking awesome. But again, like animatronics, you need to be on your A game. You need to be a bit of a custodian, a bit of a preservationist. If you are not able to do that, you will not do well in this category. The good news is that it is easier. So with movie props compared to animatronics, technically you could put them in the same thing because there are animatronics that were movie props, like the Jurassic Park T-Rex animatronic. But the thing here, the big difference is that I'd say movie props in general are typically much more expensive, believe it or not, and but easier to maintain. Because the thing with most animatronics is very few people collect them because it's just that fucking difficult. It is extremely difficult to collect animatronics. So movie props still very difficult, but not as hard as animatronics. But that market has been, the movie prop market is more understood now. So that's why you're seeing X-Wing props from Star Wars selling for $3 million. And there's a reason for that. Like, movie props are becoming established. They are becoming legit pieces of history. Now, a lot of them are based off pop culture, which is very true. However, it is the peak of pop culture, which you got to understand. You know, that Skywalker lightsaber prop is the reason Star Wars is cool. Not Rocket Fett. Darth Vader's movie prop helmet is the reason Star Wars is cool. A Godzilla suit is the reason Godzilla is a pop culture phenomenon. You are buying the items that created the pop culture, making them fundamentally, historically significant for that reason. So that's what you gotta take to consideration when you're talking about movie props. So, yeah, I'm out of breath. That's all I have for this video. Here is the final completed tier list. There's more things in S tier I wanted there to be, but I'd be lying if I knocked down anything. I'm pretty content with this tier list. Let me know what you guys think. I'm almost guaranteed I missed something. I had two things in the middle of this recording. You know, one thing I will say, if you want the most money, if you want to maximize your profits, the number one thing you should collect is the S&P 500. I don't want to be that guy, but none of these are true investment items. Collectibles are not real investments. They are speculative fundamentally. The S&P will beat out 99.9999999% of collectibles. Even if you got them for free and it became $1 million in 30 years, the S&P can still challenge that, if not outright beat it. So if you're trying to just make money, collectibles are not for you. The people who do the best in collectibles are the people who truly enjoy them, are the people who were there when it wasn't cool, and were there who never cared about the money and just loved the items for what they were. So please understand that if you want to do truly well in collectibles, you have to actually be a fan of the items and not a greedy slop reseller, which is why they're suffering. That's about it. Thank you guys for watching. I hope you enjoyed. This is a very impulsive video to make. There's going to be some CSGO footage behind, but yeah, that's about it. Take care, and I'll see you soon. Peace.